We'll share funny stories, heartwarming stories, and stories that will make you think. From stories about love, travel, and adventure to stories about life, family, success, and secrets, you'll find it all here. So join us and get ready for some incredible stories on Internet Recap's weekly compilation. What is the strangest thing you've seen that you cannot explain? Story 1. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like, when I say speeding, I mean at least 25 over the limit. Anyway, this car gets behind me, and for some reason, I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full tinted Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me, I got a really eerie feeling I can't explain, like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop, they would light me up for speeding, but for some reason they just kept pace with me, also speeding themselves. So at this point, I'm getting a little weirded out, so I turn off the freeway, and they follow me. I turn into a gas station and get out. I figure if I'm going to get axe red-rummed, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck rolls its windows down, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a heavily disfigured guy, the only likes of which I can compare to that guy Rocky Dennis from the movie about the guy with the crazy disfigured head who falls for that girl who loves him for him and not the abomination that is his face. And he starts to motion me with his finger, like telling me to come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers, there was no way in heck I was going to approach his car. I bolt inside the gas station at this point, my whole body is shaking. I try to tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm drunk or high off my butt, as my story doesn't make any sense. I go to look outside, and the truck is gone. I still have nightmares to this day. He was trying to warn you about the red rummer in your back seat. Or he was trying to warn you how going 25 over causes accidents that can horrifically disfigure you or the other driver, by dangerously chasing after you in an indignant rage. Story 2. I was a resident advisor when I was in college. All the resident advisors would come back a week before the winter semester starting for training, which meant no students were back in the dorms. We were the only ones in the building. One night, I heard the door to my shared bathroom open. The sound of the doorknob turning woke me up, so I kind of groggily said my suite mate's name. She would sometimes come through the bathroom to talk or ask me for advice. Then I realized my suite mate was on an extended holiday in Italy, so no one should have been in our suite at all. I immediately shot up and looked toward the bathroom door. It was almost pitch black in my room, but next to the bathroom door, I could see the perfect outline of a human face wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I couldn't see the details of the face, but I could see shadows where the eyes, mouth, and nose would have been. It was as if someone was standing next to the door, staring at me. I had no idea what to do, because no one was back in the dorms. I knew that the nearest RA was 2 floors away and wouldn't hear me scream for help. I stared at the face for a few seconds, and it stared back. Then I shifted slightly on the bed, and it completely disappeared. I got up to check the door, and it had been closed the whole time. It's been almost 7 years, and it still freaks me out when I think about it. Story 3. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to my husband one night and straight up said, "Grandpa's passed away." A few moments later, we got a call from my husband's sister saying that their father had passed away. Happened a few months back, still creeping me out. I feel like the 3 and underage can be super creepy. When my son was not even 3 yet, he came to my room and kept telling me the lady was in his and his sister's room. I was half asleep and dismissed it, telling him to snuggle up in my bed with me. So he got in my bed, but every few minutes kept waking me up to tell me about the lady. Then he says she's at my bedroom door. So in an effort to show him there is no lady and we should just go back to sleep, I pick him up and walk him in the dark out of my room. We stand in the hall and I say, "See, there's no lady." He points his finger down the hall where there's nothing to see at all and says, "Mama, she's right there. That's the lady. And this is her house." Nothing, not even a shadow where he was pointing. I kind of just tried not to show he was freaking me out and said, "Okay, she must be a nice lady," and took him back to my bed where he promptly fell asleep. and I stayed awake for hours thinking this lady in my 100-plus-year-old apartment must be hanging out watching me sleep. Story 4. When I was young, my parents and I relocated across the country to Maine. We lived in a very small town, and our house was old, beat up, and on many acres deep in the forest. It had 2 stories, with the top story being the main level and the bottom story being the bedroom level. My bedroom had several large windows that looked out into the forest. I don't remember having curtains or blinds, but I'm sure I must have, because my mother never forgot details like that when decorating my bedrooms as a child, but I must have left them open one night. I remember waking up in the darkness with a faint glowing orb of light hovering just outside my window. I watched it in utter terror as it went slowly across one window and then the next, before pausing, flashing briefly into my bedroom, before shifting into the third and final window and disappearing altogether. I was so upset by the ordeal that I went and woke my parents up, and my stepfather stormed the backyard with his gun in hand. There was nothing, and no sign of the strange orb. My eyes are watering as I write this. Deep down, as an adult looking back, I realized that orb was anything but magic. It was someone's flashlight. It never happened again, but I'm still afraid of having window blinds open at night. Story 5. Was driving home from work one afternoon with my brother and cousin in the car. As we were sitting in traffic, I noticed high up in the sky and way out in the distance a small, motionless black square. I pointed it out, and both my brother and my cousin spotted it quickly, so I knew it wasn't in my head. It just remained still for about 45 minutes, and then the sun had set, and it was too dark to spot it any longer. It just stayed in the exact same spot the whole time, and while it was really far away, you could still tell it was a perfect square shape. Once I got home, I went online to see if there were any mentions of it anywhere, and there was nothing. To this day, I still think about it and wonder what the F I was looking at. I had a similar experience a few years ago. Big black square up in the sky on my way to work. Bothered the heck out of me. Few days later, I saw it again. Said, frick work, gotta go chase that thing. Got close enough to see it was a cylindrical hot air balloon. Boss didn't quite understand, but it was pretty easy going. That being said, I just did a quick Google and can't seem to find mention of it online. That was in Saskatoon, Canada. Story 6. I was taking a trip with my then-girlfriend, and we had to cross the Hudson River to get to where we were going. There are only a handful of bridges across, and I know them all from having grown up in the area. On that particular trip, we were supposed to take the Bear Mountain Bridge, but I got off the wrong exit and passed it. We decided it wasn't a big deal. The next bridge, the Newburgh Beacon, was actually closer to where we were going. It would just bring us a little bit over past our destination, but not enough to really matter. So we kept on driving, not really paying specific attention to where we were, since it was probably 20 or 30 minutes until we got there. Well, we never crossed the Newburgh Beacon that day. We also never crossed Bear Mountain, and we certainly didn't drive an extra half an hour to the mid-Hudson or turn around and go back to the tap. When we did take a minute to check where we were and how close the bridge was, we found we were already on the other side of the river. No bridge, we were just already there. So either there's a secret tunnel somewhere under the river, we had our memories erased, or we found some kind of spatial rift somewhere in the Hudson Valley. Story 7. I'll preface this by saying I don't really believe in the paranormal or superstitions, although I find these topics super interesting. But something really weird happened one night after leaving a movie theater with a friend that I've never been able to rationalize. We had just watched a horror movie as well, so we were definitely in that spooky mood. During our drive home out of the city, I lived in the country, we counted 3 cars pulled over in different areas on the road. As we get onto the highway, we count about 8 more in various locations, all at a decent distance apart, so it's not like they're yielding to an ambulance or something like that. We got about halfway to my house, and we ended up counting a total of 12 cars before my friend freaks out and begs me to take a back road. He was convinced it was a sign that we may get in a collision or a road accident of some kind. We were silent the rest of the ride home. I've brought it up to him once or twice since then, and he gets really defensive and shuts it down immediately. It really bothered him. It's definitely weird, and I can't explain it, but it makes for an interesting story. Story 8. Was sitting in my lounge room alone one night watching TV, heard clear as day someone coming up the stairs barefoot. I thought it was just a family member coming up the stairs, but then had the, oh, frick, realization that I was home alone. For some reason, I just sat there looking at the doorway, waiting for whatever was coming up these stairs to walk through the door. Heard the staircase creaking and everything. Heard the bare feet get to the top of the stairs, step onto the tiles, and take the 3 to 4 steps it would take to be in sight of the doorway to the lounge room I'm sitting in. But nothing came through the door. I sat there for about 5 seconds, waiting. Said to myself out loud, F dealing with that right now, and kept watching TV. I've heard other things like glass moving and footsteps and all, but the second most notable thing I can't explain was me and my mom hearing something talk to our dog downstairs in a mumbled male voice we couldn't understand. If I heard that on my own, I'd have just thought it was my brain playing tricks, but my mom also heard it. Story 9. Years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our second child and about to give birth, my mom came to stay with us for a few days to help take care of our oldest child. One early evening, Mom asked for a pen, paper, and an envelope. When I gave them to her, she wrote on the paper, sealed it in the envelope, and gave it to me, saying, "Put this in your pocket and don't open it. You'll know when," she said. 30 minutes later, my wife announced it was time to go to the hospital. She was in labor. So we did, and about 9 hours later, our second daughter was born at 3:45 a.m. She weighed 8 pounds 11 ounces and was 20 inches long. This being pre-cell phone days, I called my mom from the hospital to tell her the news. She answered the phone and immediately said, "Before you say anything, open the envelope." I did. It said, "Girl, 3:45 a.m., 8 pounds 11 ounces, 20 inches. I kept that paper for years. When my mom passed away, I went to our document safe where we kept it, but it was gone. What's the most satisfying act of revenge that you've ever experienced? Story 1. My old neighbor and I never really got along that well when we were kids. I was the first to get the original Xbox in our little 3-house neighborhood, and he was the first to get the Xbox 360. One day he comes over and keeps telling me that my Xbox is a piece of crap, and that I should just break it, so my parents updated it for me. We argue, and it eventually comes to a point where he somehow gets a hold of my Xbox, then he drops it, and plastic goes everywhere. My mom heard the crash, and me, not wanting to get my neighbor into trouble, I idolized him for some reason, said I had knocked it off of the TV stand. He goes home, and I'm ticked off, because I'm out of an Xbox. A few months later, his family goes out of town on a cruise or something, and lets me take care of the house, letting dogs in and out, watering plants, etc. Realizing I had the place to myself, I go grab his shiny new 360 and paint over the little receiver window on the front of it. After testing and confirming it doesn't work, I put it exactly back the way it was and wait for them to return. About a week after they get back, I go over to hang out and play Xbox with him. He nearly breaks down crying, saying it won't work, and his parents overhear and offer to buy him a new one. They were pretty rich. He accepts, and I ask if I can buy the one he has, since I wanted to open it up and see what was inside. He ends up just giving me the console. 6 years later, things still work like a dream. Too long didn't read, friend broke my Xbox, I broke his, and he ended up giving it to me. Story 2. I couldn't stand this one kid who I went to high school with, who lived a few blocks away in the neighborhood. One night he sent cops to my parents' house, where I was still living, telling them I had done something I didn't do. Luckily, I had a receipt in my pocket from the restaurant I was at, in a suburb 10 miles away that was time-stamped half an hour later than when he said the incident occurred. Regardless, my parents were woken up, etc., etc. I was ticked off. Well, a few days later, my mom bought some plants that she left in the kitchen window. Our family cat was a nutball to begin with, but all of a sudden, he was constantly jumping on the counters, eating these plants. When I'd try and shoot him down, he would actually take a defensive stance and hiss and scratch. 10 minutes later, he would be back, chewing on the leaves. I asked my mom what the plants were, and she said, "Oh, they're catnip. They have a really pretty flower. I'm going to plant them in the backyard when the weather warms up." I was like, "Not a chance you're planting these in our backyard. Look what you're doing to the cat. He's an aggressive stoner. You'll bring every cat in the neighborhood, and they will all fight all night long." Suddenly, at that exact moment, a revenge plot was born. The following night, I snuck into his backyard and planted the catnip everywhere. My friend who lived across the street from him told me it worked perfectly, and that he was always complaining about cat fights in his backyard after that. Revenge. No physical confrontation, no property damage, just stoned cats. Felt a little like some sort of supervillain sending out my cat minions to do my dirty work. Story 3. It was actually against me, if that gives you any clue as to how justified and perfect it was. When I was 4 and my brother was 6, we were on our way to my great-grandfather's funeral. My parents stop at McDonald's, and out of my brother's small fry bag, the 4.5-inch tall white bag of fries, he pulls an 11-inch fry. Impossible, right? We're in the back seat. I see it. He yells to my parents to witness this awesome fry, but before they can turn around, I snatch it and eat it. He is upset. Whatever. Cut to 12 years later, home after school, no parents, friends hanging out in the kitchen, everyone is scurrying around for an after-school snack. My brother and I are at the table, and our friends are in the other part of the kitchen. Out of this bag of wavy Lays, I pull a potato chip that is literally the size of my skull. No idea how this thing didn't break in transit. I'm like, oh my God. Guys, look at this chip. Before anyone can even turn their heads, my brother reaches across with his right hand and crushes the chip to crumbs. I have WTF eyes bearing down on him, and he simply says, "That's for the fry." 12 years had passed, and we had never spoken about it, but it took less than a second to remember everything and just nod in agreement that the score was settled. One enormous potato product for another. True story. Story 4. This is pettier revenge, but yeah. A few years back, my 15-year-old cousin was staying over at my place, which I shared with my boyfriend at the time. Her parents were on vacation in Cuba for a few weeks. While she was with us, we had to make all of her food. She couldn't cook and waited for me or my boyfriend to come home. Otherwise, she would only eat chips or popcorn. She wouldn't even make a sandwich. One day, she updated her Facebook status, which was a whiny complaint about how bored she was. She had free reign to go out, and how weird I was. I guess she forgot I have her on Facebook. It really ticked me off, since I made all of her meals and tried my best to keep her company. That night, when I was making her a turkey sandwich, I took my revenge. I used the end slices of the bread loaf to build the sandwich, and the bitter white part of a romaine lettuce leaf. I also put too much mayo on it. She ate that sandwich, and she had a look of annoyance on her face, but there was nothing she could do. Story 5. This one time when I was about 15 or 16, I was about to walk inside my building, had just placed the keys in the lock, when, reflected in the door, I saw 2 girls walking by behind me. I can actually hear one of them say, as she points at me, "Let's talk to this guy." But then her friend goes, "No, not him. He's ugly. Let's go." The girl that actually wanted to talk to me was cute and everything, man. So not only did her friend dong block me, so to speak, but she also called me ugly, and that hurt. I walk upstairs, walk into my place, and then walk over to the balcony to see if I can spot the girls. They're right across the street, talking to each other, and the dong blocker is being a bit loud and obnoxious. That did it for me. I walk back into the kitchen, grab a slice of ham, and swoosh, throw it at the girl. Direct hit. She had a total what the F look on her face, which made me smile. Of course, in retrospect, that was a stupid thing to do, and I wouldn't do it again. Too long didn't read. Ham her time. What is the female equivalent of a neckbeard? Story 1. She doesn't take care of herself at all. She may be very overweight because of this, but not necessarily. She's weak, her hair hangs in some blank, non-style, unless she's on her way to an anime con, in which case she wears some wig or does it up with multicolored dreads and extensions. Her skin is bad. She alternates between not wearing makeup and wearing deliberately unflattering makeup, for example, dark purple lipstick, because she thinks that by defying typical beauty standards, she is above them, when in reality, her defiance is evidence of her obsession with standards of beauty. She dresses in lots of baggy black things because she's ashamed of her body. She has very low self-esteem. She claims to be bisexual because she thinks some girls are pretty, and she once kissed a girl to show off or prove a point about how daring and unconventional she is. She has never dated a woman or done it with a woman. She claims to be a pagan because she once shoplifted a silver raven wolf book and set up a Wiccan altar in her bedroom, which is now gathering mold under some old containers of manic panic and dirty t-shirts. She doesn't know any other pagans and doesn't remember when any of the holidays are except for Samhain. She would desperately like a boyfriend, but she's too awkward and ashamed and fearful of real intimacy to have one. She covers for her low self-esteem by pretending no man is good enough for her. She has a laundry list of traits she says she's looking for. For instance, he has to be tall, muscular, athletic, a genius, kind to animals, and he has to look like Ryan Gosling and be a stallion in bed. And he has to love all the same things she does. Until she meets this ludicrous fantasy man, she derives her inflated sense of self-worth from the 2 or 3 awkward and scrawny teenage boys, often younger than her, who follow her around and sit at her feet. Even if you look past her pompous facade and try to talk to her, you find she has little to say. She only talks about herself and her friends and their private in-jokes. She constantly makes pop culture references to her favorite TV shows and movies, and if you don't understand them all, she rolls her eyes and stomps away indignantly. Story 2. She's not like other girls. She hates drama. She doesn't wear makeup because it's fake, and see, also not like other girls. She's super into Wicca and magic, and often goes by Akasha Moonlight. She wears neckties over t-shirts and fingerless gloves. Tabletop RPGs are her weekly night out. She keeps offering to make her friends reusable cloth sanitary towels. She supports PETA when it suits her. She's celibate by choice because her anime crush isn't real and no one else measures up. Edit. She throws random Japanese words and phrases into English sentences, and even though you don't watch anime, you know she's using them wrong. When you call her out on that stuff, she pouts and mutters, "Baka?" under her breath. She made her own prom dress, and you were so embarrassed for her, you contemplated burning it off of her. She boasts of her sewing skills to this day, having made 1 or 2 misshapen, unidentifiable plushies and a purse out of a pair of old skater jeans. She claims to smoke clove cigarettes, but you saw her awkwardly pose with one once without smoking it whatsoever. Also, you know her parents would end her life if she smoked. She's secretly happy they're illegal now, so she can whine about not having any without anyone being able to call her on it. When it benefits her to be one of the guys, she'll break her neck trying, but the second it looks like being a woman will score her some points, she'll ham that up to the best of her ability. 1 minute she's all, "I can take it, don't treat me like a girl," and the next it's, "You wouldn't hit a woman, would you?" She goes to the cool goth store downtown just to look at all the stuff she can't afford, to the point that she's starting to be some kind of store groupie. The staff all know her by name and are sick of letting her try on pewter jewelry she's not going to buy. You can't remember the last time 6 months went by that she didn't have some sort of crisis, illness, bereavement, or reason for everyone to be super nice and supportive and let her get away with being a brat. 90% of these things are, you suspect, made up, but it's not worth accusing her because she hates drama. Story 3. I have a Facebook friend through a hockey team. She knows what she's talking about when it comes to sports, but she fancies herself a little bit of a puck bunny. That is, someone that chases after professional hockey players when she's about 50 pounds overweight and clingy as heck. She has a boyfriend that she talks about on Facebook, but he doesn't believe in Facebook and refers to him as himself because he doesn't want his identity on the grid. Maybe he's embarrassed of you or doesn't exist, so you had to cover your tracks. She posts on Facebook about her traditional values, cooking for her brothers, and her really boring nephews that she obsesses over. She has this obsession with things like real gentlemen treat women like this, etc., because I think her version of men is Disney romanticized and not based in actual fact. She has a white knight friend who comments on her posts a lot, like a puppy dog. She seems to ignore him because he's like a 4 or 5 in attractiveness, about where she is, but she still thinks about hockey players she played volleyball with. I'm pretty sure she's single, goes to church all the time, and gets drunk with gay male friends about how nobody pays any attention to her. Story 4. The female equivalent of a neckbeard is a not like those other girls girl. Yeah, you're a female, but you're not like, those other girls. Other girls are stupid and vapid and only care about boys and shopping. Other girls only watch rom-coms, and their favorite activities are gossiping and stabbing each other in the back. Other girls are horses who wear tacky clothes and too much makeup and have no self-respect. You're not like that. You watch anime, subs only of course, and play video games. You don't read Twilight or any of those crappy paranormal romance novels. You read comic books and A Song of Ice and Fire, which you liked before the show, thank you very much. You'd rather fling yourself off an overpass than wear something girly or pink. All your friends are guys, and they know you're one of them. You're one of the cool girls. You're smarter than all those ditzy popular girls, and that makes you better than them. You're a unique and special snowflake amongst a sea of clones, like but other girls. And maybe, just maybe, one day some cute nerdy guy will see you for the catch you are and be the derp to your derpina. People who've met the parents and family of the person you intended to marry and then decided against marrying them after meeting them, what happened? Story 1. I knew a really sweet guy who went to the same college as I did who was super religious. But I didn't mind because it wasn't like shoving pamphlets in your face religious. Because he had a pretty strict religious background, much stricter than normal as you'll see, he couldn't date a girl until he courted her for 2 years. Essentially, he had to know you for over 2 years, regular contact in person, and only interacting in groups, before he could officially ask you out on a date. Now, this was a really good guy. He got his arm stuck in a vending machine for me. He was good. But obviously I wouldn't be telling the story here if his family were great people. About a year into knowing him, we were in the break room chatting about issues with a website, and the entire time we're talking, he's glancing at the clock nervously like it's going to explode. I check, and it's 4 p.m. I'm still watching it as it turns to 4:01, and suddenly I hear a car horn go off. I think that it's just traffic, until it's still going off at 4:04. I ask him what he thinks it's about, and he's white as a sheet, and sheepishly explains that it's his dad, and he needs to go home now. It was quite the eye-opener. If this dude, his dad, was willing to lay on the horn for over 5 minutes during finals, I can't imagine the other crap he'd do if I was ever late for anything. It sucked because the son was just trying to spend a few extra minutes with me, which was sweet. But I told him that I had been doing some thinking, and while we were good friends, we weren't really compatible relationship-wise, and he handled it like a champ. Last month, I discovered that I had dodged a bullet. You see, he had a brother, and his brother got hit by a truck. He lived, but in critical care, and no one in his family visited him because he stopped attending their church. The fact he moved 7 hours away eludes them. They also refused to attend his wedding. I'm very glad they're not my in-laws, and I didn't pursue a relationship with someone who refused to visit their critically injured brother because of religious views. They are horrible people. I hate when people use "I go to church" as a reason they're good people. It's not a blanket reason for goodness. Story 2. Dated this girl for 2 years. She was cute, but a little off, as in she would cut herself superficially, then talk about how much better she felt. Whatever, I was 19, and if you look past that, she was great. She was very close to her grandfather. I had met him a few times before. Sweet guy. One day, she gets the news that he's passing away, so we drive to see him off. Meeting the rest of the family, this is where it gets fun. Her mom didn't strike me as particularly crazy at first, but once I sat down to talk to her, she started getting overly sappy, talking about marriage. But no kids. Kids are the worst thing that can happen to you. Okay. The aunt just wanted to argue with everyone about everything and belittle her grown adult nieces and nephews. Her sister was very obviously a woman of the night, and almost always had some coke residue around the bottom ring of one nostril or the other. She also brought a bouquet that completely filled the tiny hospital room. The lady passing away next to Grandpa was not amused. Her brother offered me a slew of drugs while I was there. Much appreciated, but calm down, man. And as Grandpa laid there, struggling to hold on to the last threads of life, he got to watch his entire family fall apart, mostly arguing over which of his possessions would go to who. There were also some other rumors about Grandpa essentially family members. This made his bedside as well. It was probably the most effed up last days a person has ever experienced. I left early because I couldn't stand it anymore. Too much drama over an ending life man. I had been contemplating how to break up with her the following few weeks after that, when she started hanging out with her manager at work, and after work, getting rides home with him, and boning him. Good riddance. To be fair, this would explain everyone being kind of crazy and effed up. It's sad when that happens, really. Story 3. It was one of the contributing factors, but yeah, the biggest reason I'm glad I'm no longer with this girl was her harpy of a mother. I've written about this girlfriend and her mom before, but I'll condense it a bit. Her mom couldn't handle the fact that her beautiful, feminine daughter was a lesbian. She hated me for not being male, Jewish, rich, or an Ivy League grad. The fact her daughter was happier with me than she'd ever been in her life didn't matter. She emotionally abused her and would use my girlfriend's OCD to manipulate her into not seeing me. You're driving that late with Leo? Aren't you worried you might get carjacked? She would grill her about our intimate life, and judging from things she'd said, I'm convinced this woman hasn't been intimate since my girlfriend was conceived. She forced me to submit to an STD test. Remember, girlfriend has OCD, so she'd convinced her I must be diseased. So to stop my girlfriend from panicking, I had to do it. She also treated my girlfriend like a child, literally telling her, "You're not an adult," and forcing her to live in a bedroom that was decorated for an infant. She threatened to call the cops and say I'd kidnapped her if she spent the night with me. Adding to the creepiness is that she would talk to me as if I was her daughter's babysitter or caretaker. This would include telling me that she needed to be home earlier so that she could get enough sleep. Ultimately, I would say that she was the end of our relationship because she more or less pushed and encouraged my girlfriend into another mental breakdown so she would leave college. She ended up institutionalized for about 6 months in 2 different fancy hospitals and hundreds of thousands of miles away from me. But she would sadly never be able to fully function again as an adult with her mom around. So I'm glad I don't have to deal with that crap anymore. That is crossing so many lines. Story 4. His mom was incredibly overbearing and controlled what he could and couldn't do by constant guilt-tripping and made-up stories. She would drape herself on him for snuggles to the point where it was awkward. I have children of my own, and I don't clasp them to my chest and sigh about how wonderful they are when their friends are over, and she would make sly digs at me all the time. What I was wearing, how I looked, why we were going out, how much money was being spent on me. We always split everything 50-50 at my insistence, by the way, and just generally made me feel like crap. He just took it. When I brought it up, he was super passive and was just like, she's my mom, she's just overprotective. He had a sister, actually, who had left home but was clearly the favorite. Whenever she came home, he was forgotten and shrugged off, to the point where it was actually mean. Again, I brought it up to him, and he was all, she's just excited to see her daughter. His dad was a very passive, albeit kind, man himself, who just seemed to roll with whatever his wife wanted, and I guess my boyfriend learned that from him. She was heading for classic mother-in-law from heck territory. There was no talking my boyfriend round. He batted my concerns and feelings on the matter away like they were nothing. I realized that would be our marriage, and I knew I couldn't live that way. It obviously wasn't the only reason I split from him, but it was a key issue. I have no regrets. When we split, he very quickly started dating and then married a local girl. They were divorced within 2 years, and from what I could gather from mutual friends, his mother was pivotal in the failure. Story 5. He wasn't my fiancé, but he was my first boyfriend in high school and my last. Meeting his family freaked me out so much that I swore off relationships until I graduated with a college degree. Context, I'm an American citizen but was living in Asia for a time. I started high school in one of those countries. By junior year, I had my first boyfriend. One day, he invited me and our friends to his house for his birthday. I met his parents and sister at the house, and while they were nice, they treated me with some weird reverence. Everyone in town knew I was an Americana and knew I spoke mainly English. At one point, they gave me a tour of their house, and his folks were pressuring me to go into my boyfriend's bedroom alone with him. I said no. They then began to talk amongst themselves, but they failed to realize that I understood their language by then. Turns out that they were conspiring to get me locked in the room with their son, have their boy force me into doing stuff I didn't want to do, and then have the two of us marry. All this in the hopes of getting a green card for their kid and a ticket to migrate to America. Apparently, my American citizenship was all they saw of me. I was only 15 at the time. I went from being that teenager anticipating her first kiss to breaking up with him the next Monday at school. I didn't even know if that's how one gets a green card, but just knowing his parents were willing to ruin my life like that, nope, not having it. Blah. And they didn't think much of your parents either. If they assumed your parents would force you to marry someone who raped you. Story 6. Well, by intended to marry, I mean the first serious girlfriend I had as a 16 or 17-year-old, so it was kind of dumb to think that, but anyway, she was 18 or 19 while we dated, so I had started to think about marriage when we were both of age. She was a little rough around the edges, but man, when I met her family, they were the definition of white trash. Smoke filled the house with beer bottles everywhere, parents that were both in their early 40s but looked in their mid-60s, older sister that had a baby that she didn't know who the father was, younger brother, nice enough to me, had pending assault charges, and once bought a jar of pee off me to pass a drug test. Other brother was in jail for ending the life of someone while driving drunk. Every other word out of any of their mouths was a curse word. 6 kids, including my girlfriend, and not one of them had a high school diploma, and the 2 that were still school age had dropped out. I realized that, despite being poor, this was not a family I wanted to be a part of. I kept dating her a few more months after meeting them, but when I broke it off, family was the reason, which I actually did tell her. And I'm guessing the last thing that really frustrated me was that she paid rent, was 18, had a full-time job, and they still treated her like a child with rules, such as curfew, limited phone time, etc. While I would say her family was a huge part of us breaking up, it was not the only thing. But I couldn't actually say for 100% that we wouldn't have stayed if her family wasn't an issue. Story 7. I married him anyway, but from the day I met his mom, she hated me. She would rave about how much she adored his brother's girlfriends, but hated me. I tried so hard, but she hated me. My husband is her favorite thing, and she has an unhealthy attachment to him, so I think it's not personal and more along the lines of no girl will ever be good enough for him in her eyes. She's a witch, though. She once faked a severe panic attack to keep her son's attention on her, not me. The doctors at the hospital could see right through it, though, and knew she was faking. She called my husband the night before our wedding and told him if he married me, he would be miserable for the rest of his life. When we went home for Christmas, she tried to hook him up with her coworker, her married son, while I was right there. We rescued a shelter dog, and shortly after, he broke a leg due to malnutrition in his neglectful home. She told everyone that I didn't want to pay the vet bill and asked the vet to euthanize him. She laughed at me when she learned I was depressed. She told me I was being dramatic when I started crying after receiving news of my grandpa's death. She tells everyone that I came from a poor family and married my husband so I wouldn't have to work. I don't work right now because we just moved for his job. In reality, my parents are wealthier than her. She tries to belittle me, but it honestly doesn't bother me at all anymore. I laugh when she does, and it really ticks her off. Story 8. We weren't at the marry stage of things yet. Gay marriage wasn't legal back when this happened. But we had been dating for over a year and were considering moving in together. Apparently, my girlfriend had always used a gender-neutral nickname for my name anytime she talked about me to her family, and she never corrected them when they said he. But after a year of us dating, we were finally going to have a family dinner with them. She had already had dinner with my parents, and they loved her. And when I showed up, her parents had a really sour look on their face. Apparently, she hadn't told them that I was a girl until about 2 hours before the dinner was supposed to happen. Her parents weren't actually homophobic, just severely disappointed that they wouldn't be getting grandkids. Girlfriend was an only child, and that soured the mood of the dinner. Honestly, I'm sure they would have come around eventually, but that whole incident told me that my girlfriend wasn't ready to be out of the closet yet. One of the discussions during dinner was, don't tell grandma. And I wasn't going to move in with someone just to be the roommate to most of the people they know. I told her that I'd rather live by myself for now, and she got upset and we had a fight and ended up breaking up. I feel like a good part of the blame lies with your girlfriend for deceiving them. Even as someone who'd be okay with your relationship, I'd be ticked off if I discovered that my daughter was lying, lie of omission, to us for a year about her significant other. Story 9. His family was horrible to me, and he treated me so poorly while we were visiting, 3 weeks solid because they lived in another country. His mother constantly called me by his ex's name. I have the same name as his sister. How is it possible to get that confused with another name which both starts with a completely different letter and is much longer than mine? His sister wouldn't actually speak to me or include me in any kind of conversation. Her partner was totally lovely and tried his best to include me, but the times that I spent with his sister or mother, I was basically just the tag-along who was asked to hold the baby while they did things. His dad wasn't so bad, all things considered, but he made snide comments about my weight, which, yeah, is fair. Family, who he'd never met, lack of career aspirations, while I was financially supporting his butthole of a son who was trying to make a go of a business at the time and was just generally a terrible human being. He wouldn't stick up for me or correct any of this, and whenever I brought it up, would basically say I was imagining it. By the end of this trip, we were sleeping in separate bedrooms, and I broke up with him not long after. For the record, snide comments about your weight were completely inappropriate and rude. That's never okay in any situation. Story 10. I married him anyway, but as long as we're talking about dodging bullets, I've got a good story about my mother-in-law. When my husband and I were dating, his mother spent the better part of a year and a half trying to convince him to dump me. I had done nothing to her whatsoever. When I would go visit, she would be nice to me in front of everyone, but then switch off and completely ignore me when no one else was around. Fast forward to 5 years later, we are married, but mother-in-law is now divorced. She had an affair with, and then secretly got married to, a man convicted of his own children. She spent the better part of a year lying to us about why she wanted the divorce, that she was seeing someone, and then she tried to hide the man's past from us, along with her secret marriage. She sees nothing wrong with her actions and thinks her new husband is totally safe. We've cut her out of our lives for the safety of our children and for our own sanity. My mother-in-law's mother-in-law told her then future daughter-in-law not to marry her son. She did it anyway. After over 30 years of emotional abuse, constantly belittling her millions-income career and housework, her cooking, and every little thing she did, she finally divorced him, only after the abuse became physical. What's that one story you've always wanted to tell, but no one has ever asked the right question? Story 1. I was a huge slacker in high school. I wouldn't read reading assignments, I'd cheat on assignments and tests, I outright didn't do assignments if I didn't feel that the grade was worth the time, etc. Most of my teachers were aware of my laziness, and a few of them rightfully suspected the cheating aspect as well. My buddy was the same way. In my Spanish 1 class, we had Spanish nicknames just for fun. Mine was Tomas, and my buddy was Jose. This was the last period of each day, and our teacher would let us out before the bell would ring if we were to finish class early. For each chapter in our textbook, we'd be given an assignment to make flashcards, on which one side would be one of the chapter's vocabulary terms, and the other side would be the English translation. Easy assignment, right? Well, it was worth such a few points that I couldn't be bothered to ever do it anyway. To grade them, she'd walk up and down the aisles between the desks, check for the stack of vocabulary cards, and move on to the next student. Nothing too thorough. It's the end of the period, and we're ready to leave early as usual, which she said that we could do after she checks our cards. She goes to check Jose's cards, and he actually has them done. I'm just stunned, as much as he is. As she comes up to the aisle and with her back turned, Jose passes me his cards. As she approaches me, she asks, "Tomas, do you have your vocabulary cards?" Without even looking at me, expecting me to say, "No." "Yes, ma'am," I responded, flashing the cards at her. She knows that something is up. "Jose, where are your cards?" "Oh, I put them away, Mrs. Reyes." "Do you mind pulling them out and showing them to me again?" As Jose reaches underneath his desk for his binder, he of course doesn't say anything, but he doesn't have to. His facial expression says it all. I neither want to screw over my friend, nor want to get caught cheating. How severe would the punishment be? Our friend Jamie is eager to have his cards checked so that he can leave early. Completely unaware of what's going on, Jamie walks up to Mrs. Reyes from behind and asks if she'll check his cards. She turns around, and as she checks his cards, I give Jose his cards back. How do I get us out of this predicament? Mrs. Reyes turns back around and sees Jose with his cards. She then looks at me and says, "Tomas, now where are your cards?" I threw them away," I sheepishly answer. She gives me the all too familiar look of disappointment and asks, "Why would you do that?" I continue, "Let's be honest. You and I both know that I won't use them anyway." "Well, go get them and show them to me, please." This is it. We're about to get caught cheating. I walk to the trash can, brainstorming what to do, when I get to it and don't have any cards to show her. Do I shamefully act like they're suddenly missing from the trash can? Do I cut the bullcrap and try the honesty route? I don't know. I continue to the trash can and am flabbergasted at what I find. A stack of the chapter's vocabulary cards sitting neatly on top. No freaking way. I bring them back to my desk and show them to her. She looks to Jose and he flashes his cards to her as well. With a surprised tone, she says, "I'm sorry that I ever doubted you two." She continues checking others' cards, and my buddy whispers, "Whose cards are those?" Dude, I have no freaking clue. The next day, I tell Jamie about what happened. He asks, "You know what's funny?" "What?" "Those were my cards. I threw them away on my way out of class." Those cards were there for only seconds, and he had no idea that I needed him to put them there. What are the odds? Story 2. When I was a kid, we lived out in the country, and this very pregnant dog showed up on the farm. My stepdad told us not to feed it, because we already had more dogs than we needed, and if we fed her, she might stick around and have her puppies. So, of course, we secretly fed her. Just as my stepdad predicted, she had her puppies. We were thrilled, but knew we would have to hide them from my stepdad. He's not a cruel man, but he would have. It might be hard for a lot of people to stomach, but we were living pretty hand-to-mouth, and he lived in the reality of food for dogs versus food for kids. We didn't have the money to support stray dogs' puppies, or even the money for gas to take them to the nearest shelter. After a few weeks of sneaking the mama dog food in the back of our feed shed, she stopped showing up. I worked on a dairy farm, so I started sneaking a little milk home in my saddlebags to feed the pups. Unfortunately, after a few weeks of that, my dad found them and was pretty irate over the disobedience and stealing milk. However, with much pleading, my sisters and I convinced him to let us keep them. He said he wasn't paying for shots or food. Fine by me. I could make it in a few weeks at the dairy to get this done. Unfortunately, orphan puppies have weak immune systems, and they all got parvo before I had the money. My sisters and I spent all day and night for several days trying to keep them alive with an eyedropper of water to keep them from getting dehydrated. One by one, each pup succumbed to the illness. Eventually, only a single one was left, and my stepdad, softened by our dedication, told us we could keep it if it lived. By some miracle, she lived. We named her Sassafras, and she was the cutest little corgi mix. One day, my stepdad calls to me and tells me to grab a towel. I come outside with a bath towel, and he shakes his head no, and sends me back to get a work towel. I come back out, and he looks at me as sad as a true blue cowboy could look, and says, "I'm sorry, Pumpkin, I didn't know she was there." He had accidentally backed over the puppy's head when he put the farm truck into reverse. Sassafras had been sleeping in the shade behind the tire. He says, "It's your dog, you need to handle this." I will never forget how surprisingly hot the insides of my puppy were as I scooped her into a towel to bury her. I was heartbroken. A month or so later, my stepdad comes into my room holding a baby possum in his hand next to his chest. I was perplexed because possums were banned on the farm because they killed chickens. I stood there confused, and he gruffly says, "Well, are you going to take it or not?" I cautiously reach out and grab it. It wasn't a possum, it was a blue heeler puppy. She turned out to be the most amazing dog. I was blessed to have her in my life for almost 17 years and could write a book on all the adventures we had together. I know my stepdad might get a lot of flack from the internet folks, but he was an amazing man who taught me so much and offered very real and often hard lessons in the realities of life. I know I'm better for having him in my life. Story 3. My story is my crazy butt medical drama that happened. Wow, exactly a year and a half ago today. Everyone close to me knows about it, but it's weird talking to them about it too, because they all remember more than I do anyway, and it was a hard time for them too. Just need to talk it out sometimes, you know? So I woke up on May 1st, 2017, in excruciating pain. Some vomiting, so I thought I had some horrible food poisoning. That stopped after a couple of hours, but the pain just kept getting worse. It was in my entire abdomen, but mostly the upper right quadrant. Eventually, my then boyfriend, now fiancé, convinced me to go to urgent care. They couldn't figure out what was wrong, thought maybe a gallbladder issue, and wanted me to get an ultrasound. Gave me some tramadol and sent me on my way to the ultrasound, except they couldn't get me in until 8 a.m. the next morning. I went the next morning, barely able to walk, and only thanks to the and had the ultrasound. Now, usually the techs doing it aren't supposed to tell you anything, but she told me to expect their call soon. By 11 a.m., I had a phone call saying to go to the ER and tell them I was bleeding internally. At the ER, I get taken immediately back and a CT scan done. Over 10 tumors on my liver, 2 that are 5 centimeter diameter and 1 10 centimeter diameter, 1 that had ruptured. Over the next 15 days, I spent in the hospital, still in excruciating pain, but on epic amounts of dialuric. After discovering I'm majorly allergic to morphine, that was an adventure. Multiple surgeons and doctors come talk to me, many scans done, biopsy done. Turns out they're hepatic adenomas caused likely by contraceptive use, but it took them forever to diagnose because, 1, they're super rare, like an incidence rate of 0.004% of women on contraceptives get them, and 2, they usually get one that is, at the largest, quarter size. I had to have a liver resection, removing half of my liver and the large bleeding tumor, which grew to 15 centimeters in the days I was in the hospital. The resulting surgery gave me a fabulous 13-inch scar across the middle of my abdomen and another 8 days in the hospital following the surgery. It took about a month to be able to get out of my bed by myself and walk around for more than an hour or so, and really a full 6 months to get mostly back to normal. I had 2 embolizations in September 2017 and October 2017 to try and kill the 2 5-centimeter tumors. Recently, I had pain again and discovered I had a new crop of tumors. Had another embolization in August 2018 to try to kill those. It's so annoying, and all of my family feels sorry for me all the time. They treat me like I'm so fragile when I used to be the strongest one of the kids, me, siblings, and cousins. I'm tired of being sick Maria and am more annoyed at my new tumors rather than upset by it. It's just a frustrating existence that it's hard to explain sometimes. Every time I think something gets better, a new annoying thing crops up related somehow to the tumors. I wish I could move past this point in my life. So thanks for listening to my rant. Too long didn't read. Birth control pills gave me tumors and a giant scar. It's annoying and I'm over it. Story 4. Went on a date with a girl off Tinder and we hit it off okay. No real chemistry though, and figured I'd never see her again. Next night she texts me and tells me she's at a bar near me for a birthday and that I should come through. I figure why not, and meet up and end up having a great time. She's super chatty, and there's definitely something there that wasn't there the night before. After a few hours, she told me we should go back to my place. Why the hell not? We're talking the entire cab ride back, and she's coherent and fine. We get to my place, and she opens up her door and face plants onto the street. She has somehow become wasted during the 10-minute cab ride. At this point, she is incoherent and can't tell me where she lives, so I pick her up and walk her up to the block to my place, up 3 flights, and settle her in my room. I don't feel okay sharing a bed with her when she's like this, so I leave her some water and put a trash can by the bed, just in case, and start to leave my room and head to the couch. I hear something as I get to the door and turn back in time to see her rolling off my bed, hit her neck on the corner of the trash can, and slam onto the floor. She then starts painting the walls like a sprinkler. I just watched it happen for a minute. I can't do anything. Once she stops, I pick her up and take her to the bathroom. She starts round 2 as I go back to my room and start cleaning up. After a few minutes, I went to check on her, and she passed out in my toilet. At this point, she's completely immobile, and I can't get her up. She has become 50 pounds heavier. So I grab a pillow, put her head in my lap, and resolve to sleep in the bathroom with her, worried my roommate might stumble upon her in the middle of the night. After a few hours of rough sleep, she wakes me up and tells me she needs to use the bathroom. I leave and let her do her thing. After about 15 minutes, I get worried and go to knock on the door, only to find it ajar. I push it open, only to be confronted with a wall of stink. She passed out on my toilet while taking the obscene crap, and her head is now jammed between the toilet back and my sink somehow. I managed to get her head free, but she is out. I can't do anything more. I can't get her up, and I can't wipe her butt for her, so I leave her and go to the couch. After a few hours, I hear her get up and go to my bed. I check in on her, and she is out, fully clothed in my bed and covered in puke still. Defeated, I go back to the couch. I have to work early in the morning, so I go to check in on her around 7 a.m., only to find she has gotten her period in my bed. I leave her $10, a t-shirt and jeans, and directions to the nearest laundromat. She texted me later apologizing, and we went on another date and ended up sleeping together. I wonder what happened to her. Story 5. The play-by-play numbered list of the most inconvenient day of my life. Not the worst day, the most annoying and inconvenient and overall sucky. Number 1, got woken up by a frantic phone call from my friend asking me to drive him and his dog to the airport. I say yes because I'm stupid and nice. Number 2, paving stone falls off a truck in front of me and punches a hole in my transmission. Car totaled. Number 3, convince my other friend to pick me, friend 1, and dog up on a whim and drive us to the airport, and then me off to my parents' house to get a different car. Number 4, arrive at the airport late and get stuck at the dog drop-off place because the crate friend 1 brought is too small. Dogs are not allowed on planes in such a small crate. Number 5, accept that now I have to watch friend 1's dog for a week while he's gone because he fricked up and didn't plan anything out. Number 6, friend 2, dog, and I drove to my parents' house an hour away to pick up the car. Battery is kaput in the new car. Number 7, I spent the next 2 hours buying a new battery for my car, but now it's dark and I've wasted my whole day running errands and wrecking my car for my friend because I'm stupid and nice. Number 8, finally I started driving home with my dog from my parents' house. Number 9, halfway home, some pedestrians bolted out into the middle of the highway and I ended up swerving to not hit them, but it didn't work. Number 10, hit a woman with a car. Number 11, freak out, pull over, and run into the street to see if the woman is okay. Number 12, woman is fine, only managed to smack the side mirror, but struck out on drugs and very out of it and crying. Number 13, I feel terrible for hitting her, obviously, so I offer to drive her to wherever she needs to go, because I'm stupid and nice. Number 14, she gets in, and we drive to a trailer park to meet her boyfriend. She's on the phone the whole way and is complaining to her boyfriend about the crazy guy who hit her with her car. She did not realize at the time that I was that guy. Number 15, arrive at trailer park and immediately the dog manages to open the door and bolt out of the car. Number 16, without thinking, I ran after him, not my dog, I ain't gonna lose it, and chased him for about 20 minutes. Number 17, realized that I left a meth head in my parents' car alone with the keys in the ignition. Number 18, freak the frick out again and run back to the car. Number 19, meth head is still there. I tell her I need to take the car and chase down this dog. She responds with, I'm sorry I ruined your day, very sarcastically. Number 20, lose my temper and tell her to get the F out of my car. Number 21, finally caught the dog after 2+ hours of chasing him through a trailer park at night. Number 22, drive home and quietly drink myself silly from the crappy day I just had. Too long didn't read. I wrecked 2 cars in separate accidents, hit a woman with my car, and lost a dog that didn't belong to me, among other things, all in one day. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 6. I'd been working a job under the table and was let go. They gave me a month's pay in cash as severance. I was in shock, and not having internet at the time, this was in dinosaur times before iPhones, went to a local internet cafe downtown, run by the same company that runs EasyJet actually, to update friends and family on what happened. As I'm typing, I notice someone in my peripheral vision crouching down by my chair. I'd like to think the suddenness of having lost my job is why it takes a minute for it to click. I look down and my backpack is missing. I turn and see the guy heading upstairs to the ground floor and the exit. Not really thinking things through, I tear after the guy. I get to the top of the stairs and see him walking outside and have a moment of panic as he's going to hand my bag off to an accomplice. I manage to catch up to him and again, not really considering how badly this could backfire, grab him and start yelling at him. Fortunately, he didn't have a weapon, which was extremely lucky for me. Instead, he silently gave me my bag back and then just started to walk away up the street. I was so hyped up on adrenaline that I just stood there shaking for a while before I went back inside to finish up. When I got back to the chair, I double-checked that my personal stuff, like a digital camera, was still there because I had heard that sometimes they'll steal what they can from it first in case they get caught. Fortunately, everything was there, including the envelope with my severance in it. I had totally forgotten about it up until that point. It was basically the only time I've ever carried that much cash on me, almost $2,000, and it happened to be the day I was almost robbed. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.